Hello, my name is Katie Foster. I'm a Senior Associate in the Corporate Finance practice in London. I'm here today with Melissa Ng, who's an M&A partner in our Singapore office, who specialises in inbound M&A deals into Indonesia. Now, until recently, I understand that Indonesia has one of the most relaxed foreign investment control regimes in Asia, particularly in the banking sector. But I understand this has changed recently. Melissa, please can you tell us a bit about that?
Sure. As you said, Indonesia has until recently had a very relaxed foreign investment policy in relation to banks, allowing foreigners to own up to 99% in local Indonesian banks. This was partly due to the government bailout of many ailing banks during the 1997 Asian financial crisis, and then the subsequent resale of those banks into the private sector in the early 2000s. And this saw many foreign investors acquiring large stakes in local banks. But there have been moves afoot to review the ownership of local banks. And these were accelerated when DBS, or the Development Bank of Singapore, announced its proposed acquisition of Indonesian bank Danamon from Temasek for $7.3 billion in April 2012. So in July 2012, Bank Indonesia unveiled a new regulation which limits the single ownership of Indonesian banks by financial institutional investors to 40%, by non-financial institution investors to 30%, and by single and family shareholders to 20%.
So presumably that's going to have a very significant impact on people considering investing in banks in Indonesia.
Yes, that's correct. It'll impact both foreign investors which currently have stakes in local banks, as they will need to maintain a high level of financial health and corporate governance in order to maintain their stakes. It will also impact foreign investors looking for new investments in the banking industry, because any acquisition of more than 25% will require approval from Bank Indonesia. Interestingly, the new Bank Indonesia regulations did leave the door open for acquisitions of more than the stipulated limit for financially strong institutions. Such acquisitions would need to be approved by Bank Indonesia on a case-to-case basis, and Bank Indonesia has actually set out some of the considerations that they would take into account when looking at approving such an acquisition. As a result, I think the market has been looking at the DBS acquisition of Bank Danamon as a test case for this apparent loophole.
So we're looking forward to finding out basically what happens in that, so that there's a bit more clarity on the position going forward.
Yes, in fact, after a whole year of deliberation, Bank Indonesia finally issued their decision on the DBS Danamon transaction in May 2013. And they approved DBS's acquisition of a maximum stake of 40%, which is the limit set out in the regulation, and stated that any further acquisition would only be able to be made if DBS satisfies financial performance tests, which we measured every 6 months over an 18-month period. This was obviously a setback for DBS, who was hoping to acquire the entire stake of 67% from Temasek. And as a result, DBS has extended the long stop date for the transaction to negotiate further with Bank Indonesia. The impact of this test case is that it set a bit of a precedent for BI decisions in the future, and it's apparent to us that any foreign investor that is seeking to acquire control of a bank will need to acquire it over an 18-month period. So that the inability to acquire control to begin with, the long investment period, and the uncertainty at the end of it as to whether you can actually acquire the further stake, we think will be a significant deterrent to foreign investors.
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah. Another interesting aspect about the Bank Indonesia decision was that it placed great emphasis on the the fact that DBS was a Singaporean bank and demanded reciprocity from Singapore in terms of issuing operating licenses to Indonesian banks. This is obviously politically driven and is in addition to the financial health requirements that BI has previously set out. So it's definitely clear that Bank Indonesia is going to give itself a very wide discretion when approving bank acquisitions.
Thank you very much, Melissa.